Witness the glory, the chaos, the rise and fall of Europe.
You know, when you think of Europe, what comes to mind? Probably great art, right? Philosophy, centuries of incredible culture. But there's a flip side. A much, much darker history. One that's really written in blood and fire. For a huge chunk of its history, Europe was, believe it or not, the most violent place on the entire planet. So in this explainer, we're gonna dig in and figure out why.
I mean, just let that sink in for a second. For 500 years, more fighting than anywhere else. That single fact opens up this huge historical puzzle. Because from the time Rome fell all the way to the end of World War II, war wasn't the exception in Europe. It was the rule. It was just the constant grinding rhythm of life.
And then, suddenly, it stopped. The guns fell silent. For the last 70+ years, the heart of Europe has seen a period of peace that is completely unheard of in its history. So how did that happen? How does a continent literally defined by conflict just flip a switch? And maybe the bigger question is this gonna last? To even begin to answer that, we've got to go back. We have to look at what Europe used to be.
All right, so first things first. To really get Europe's story, you have to wrap your head around this massive contradiction at its core. It was, at the very same time, a place of the most incredible creation and the most unbelievable destruction.
I mean, just look at this. It's kind of mind-blowing. The same era that gives us the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, some of the greatest leaps forward for humanity in art and science and ideas. That same era also gives us the 30 Years' War and the Napoleonic Wars. These were conflicts of just unimaginable brutality. It's like Europe was this supercharged engine for both progress and, well, for slaughter.
Okay, so what was it about Europe that made it such a tinderbox? Well, a huge part of the answer starts with the map itself, with geography and politics. See, unlike a lot of other places, Europe never really unified into one big, stable empire. Instead, it just became this crowded neighborhood of ambitious competitors.
There's actually a term for this in political science. It's called the anarchy of states. And for hundreds of years, that's exactly what Europe was. Think about it. There was no higher authority, no big boss, no emperor, no international court that could tell France or Spain or Prussia what to do. So if you had a serious beef with your neighbor, the only place to settle it for good was on the battlefield.
And a system like that, well, it has some pretty predictable and deadly consequences. Rivalries were pretty much constant, but alliances, they shifted all the time. Anytime one country, say Napoleon's France, got a little too powerful, everyone else would team up to knock it back down. So here's the really crucial thing to understand. War wasn't seen as madness. In this chaotic system, it was actually a logical tool you had to use just to survive. And of course, that meant everyone was locked in a permanent arms race.
So if that political free-for-all was the engine of war, then you could say that big ideas and new technologies were the gasoline being poured on the fire. Because the reasons people were fighting, they started to change. They got bigger, more abstract, and a whole lot more dangerous.
You can really see this evolution over time. In the 1600s, it was all about religion. Catholics versus Protestants killing each other over the right way to worship God. Fast forward to the 1800s, and now it's about nationalism, fighting for the glory of your country, your empire. And then you get to the 20th century. Now the fights are about huge ideologies. Fascism versus communism versus democracy. It was a battle for the soul of humanity itself. And with each of these shifts, the wars got bigger, more total, and way more destructive. Then came the 20th century. After 2 world wars just completely shattered the continent, left it in ruins with tens of millions dead, Europe's leaders finally looked around and realized this old way of doing things, it's a suicide pact. They knew that if they were going to survive, they had to try something completely different, something nobody had ever tried before, something radical.
And here was the new idea, and it was absolutely revolutionary. For centuries, war was how you got ahead. It's how you got more land, more resources, more power. But the new question was, what if we could flip that script completely? What if we could build a system where working together makes you rich, and going to war is just economic suicide?
And the first step they took was just brilliant. It was so simple. They created something called the European Coal and Steel Community. Basically, it put the French and German industries for coal and steel, the two things you absolutely need to build tanks and guns, under a shared authority. By tangling up their economies like that, they made it almost impossible for France and Germany to ever go to war again.
And that tiny seed, that's what eventually grew into the European Union, a whole project designed from the ground up to make peace the only rational option. And, it's been an incredible success. It really has. But after all that history, after centuries of bloodshed, there's still this huge question that just hangs over the continent. Is this peace actually going to last? I mean, we're talking over 70 years now. That's more than an entire lifetime. The major powers of Western Europe have not gone to war with each other. If you look at the long arc of history, that is nothing short of a miracle. It's the longest stretch of peace that part of the world has ever known. That old system of anarchy, it's been replaced by a new system of cooperation.
But if history teaches us anything, it's that things change, right? Those old forces, nationalism, rivalry, the things that tore Europe apart for centuries, they haven't just disappeared. And so that leaves us with this one final, really important question. Is the peace we see in Europe today a permanent change? A real shift in the continent's DNA? Or is it just a lucky break, a temporary pause in what has otherwise been a very long, very violent story? The answer to that? Well, it's probably going to define our century.